You can go crazy watching all the composting videos on YouTube, telling you the right way to make compost, telling you the things you better not put in your compost, the mix ratios that you have to use. There's enough bad information out there that could deter people from making their own compost. So as I'm making my next batch of compost right here, I'm going to go through, I'm going to talk about some of the stuff I've learned while composting and how some of the things you're told are not true. We're going to start out right away with mix ratios. Depending where you look, you'll get 10 different answers on this. Instead of trying to measure out your materials and get that perfect mixture of browns and greens, I found just using my best judgment works out just fine. This is material from cutting my grass with leaves in it, so we have a mixture of grass clippings and leaves. And if you look here, we're starting to get a little matted up in here, which is telling me I have too much greens in here. And we're going to fix that problem by using these. I'm about to give my compost pile its second flip ever. She's pretty hot. Flip this over. Got a lot of steam coming out of there. So we know the compost action is working pretty good. She's sitting at about $1.20 right now. So one of the things we're told is we have to have that correct mix ratio. And to make sure we have that proper ratio when we make our original pile. The problem with that is you might not have the materials to get that proper ratio. So when I make my piles, I like to just use what I have. You have too many greens, you start getting this slimy mess here where everything clumps together. That's just telling me I need more brown material in here. But what if all you had was grass clippings? Even without browns added to this will eventually break down into compost. So let's go ahead and break the rules a little bit here. As I'm turning my compost, I'm going to be adding more material to the pile, which you're not supposed to do. So this is a perfect time to go ahead and take some of these leaves to fix my problem of having too many greens in here. So I'm just going to add a little bit, then go ahead, keep adding my original pile. Then I got a little bit of waste from the chicken coop right here, a lot of chicken manure mixed with some straw. Gonna go ahead and toss that in. That's a lot of nitrogen, so we'll add some more browns on top of that. So I did not have all these materials when I started to make my original pile. There's nothing wrong with coming back and adding more stuff to your compost. I think it actually works out better because we've already started the composting action with our original pile. So any new stuff that we add in here is going to break down a lot faster. It'll eventually catch up to the original material. You'll notice I'm not spraying this down with water. I would be, except for it's 25 degrees out right now and the water's frozen. Luckily, there's still plenty of moisture inside this material. And you look here, these are leaves that are not shredded up. A lot of people say you gotta shred up your materials if you want it to break down really fast, but sometimes that's just a little too much work. If you get a nice hot pile going, that's what's gonna help break down everything fast. That and flipping this thing, like we're doing now. Getting that oxygen mixed inside this pile. Another misconception is when you're making compost, you gotta make it in some sort of large bin, like pallets or some other container. And I got some big pallet bins in the back, but my problem was my water source does not reach there. So this is nice and close to my hose if I need to use it to make my compost a little more moist. And I found just making piles like this works out just fine. Just put everything right on top, give it a little pat so some of the stuff falls to the side, and everything is going to turn out just fine. I'm a big fan of the 18-day composting method. That's how this pile originally started out. Basically, when you make a large compost pile, let it sit for 4 days and then flip it every other day for the next 18 days. I flipped it after the 4 days, but then I was out of town deer hunting, so I didn't get to flip it every other day. That does not mean that this pile is a failure. As I showed earlier, we are still at 120 degrees. Which is a little lower than where I want to be, but just flipping this pile is going to make it reheat again really nice. When you're flipping your piles, one of the things you're told to do is take the outermost materials and move them to the middle. But while I'm doing that, I also like to take some of the warmer inside stuff and mix that with it as well. I like to do that because this is the stuff that's already starting to break down. It's got all those good microbes in there. I want to make sure they get inside the middle as well. I think just having that little extra heat from them inside there really helps kick this up. At some point in making your compost, you're going to run into a problem where you don't have that correct ratio of browns and greens anymore. I'm going to keep it real simple. I still have all this stuff left over. I'm just going to take this and pile it on this pile. Like I said earlier, use what you have. As I'm finishing this up, let's talk about stuff that you absolutely cannot put in your compost piles. They say do not compost dairy, meat. I have absolutely composted dairy and meat. There's nothing wrong with that. We had our power go out last year and we lost a lot of stuff in the fridge. So I pretty much took everything from the fridge and dumped it right in the compost. Spoiled meat, dressings, spoiled milk. One of the concerns is attracting vermin. Out where I live, that's not a concern. They are all over the place. Another concern is the bacteria that could cause in your compost. Any bacteria that helps break down meat is welcome in my compost. It's natural bacteria. Something dies, it rots. Those bacteria break it down, and eventually it makes its way into the soil where it helps the plants grow. And that's kind of what we're aiming for. We want the plants to grow. So meat bacteria, fine in my compost. I have composted dead animals. We have some chipmunks that like to drown in standing water around here. They've gone into compost. Don't be afraid to throw anything biological in your compost. If smell is your concern, add more carbon, more browns. That sucks in all the smells. First thing you're told is you need to cover your compost pile. I do like covering my compost pile, but I no longer have the tarp I used for my last batch. So I will not be covering this compost pile, and I know that's going to be okay, because last year my compost spent months uncovered. Mission accomplished. We have this nice pile, so now what do we do? To keep this compost going, we're going to want to keep flipping this compost pile. Here's where you're going to get a bunch of different answers. When do you flip your compost? Like I said, I was out of town, so I could not flip my compost pile. So the correct answer is when you can. If you have unlimited time and really want to keep track of your compost pile and when to flip it, this is a good investment right here. This is a compost thermometer. You can get this on Amazon. I'll put a link in the description for this. It's relatively cheap. Absolutely not necessary, but it does help. So when you're making compost, you're looking for a pile to get super hot, and at some point it's going to peak, and then this thermometer is going to start going down. Once you peak and the temperature starts going down, that's telling you it's time to flip your compost. I got this more for the fact that I wanted to see how hot I can actually make my compost get. And we topped out at close to 180 degrees one time. But like I said, you flip it when you can. It doesn't matter if you catch it at the exact right time. Once you flip your compost, it is going to heat up, even if it got a little too cold. The more you flip your compost pile, you're going to notice that everything is starting to break down a lot more. If you want to keep this compost pile massive, the more you flip it, the more of this you're going to retain. But at some point, you're going to get fed up with your compost where you don't want to flip it anymore. And that's okay, because the real magic when it comes to making compost is the finishing process. You can keep flipping this pile, but at some point you're going to notice that things just aren't breaking down anymore. You're still going to have clumps left. The finishing process is real easy because all you got to do is just take this, move it somewhere, and let it sit. Nobody wants a giant pile of compost just hanging out in the backyard. This is where I think the bin system really shines. So instead of actually using these bins to do my composting, I'm going to just keep using these for finishing. So when that pile gets where I want it to be, I'm going to take that and move it in here. Just emptied out this bin. All the compost is gone. We sifted it. There's a little bit left on the bottom here. This is really nice because I can just take that compost and let it sit in here all season long, and it's not in my way, it's not in the backyard, and it will be ready to sift by next fall. The real heroes in composting are the worms, slugs, and millipedes. They take what's left after you're finished and finish it off. In the end, composting is just something that happens naturally. We don't need to overthink it. If you got anything from this video, it would be just take what you have and make compost. Take a minute to like this video, subscribe if you're not already a subscriber. Happy composting, and thanks for watching.